Hello artists, and welcome to day 40 of the 365-day epic journey. I am DaleneFM, and today we're discussing how to draw anything.
There's no going
So you
back.
can do what you wanna do. You can do what you wanna do.
Yesterday when we were doing 1, 2 and 3 point perspective, I touched on something in that video that I really want to expand on today. And that is the common misconceptions that artists, particularly artists that are starting out, have, that one has to learn a specific way of doing things for each particular subject that you might be drawing or each particular medium that you might be using. And in my opinion, that is one of the most common misconceptions of art. A simple Google search will yield results if you're looking for how to draw a portrait or how to draw hair. The problem that I have, however, of trying to learn by this formulaic way is that you walk away from a lesson like that knowing maybe one thing more than what you knew before, and you have a little bit better of an understanding of how that artist draws that particular thing. But you now need to apply those lessons to what it is that you're drawing. It's very difficult to take a lesson that somebody has taught you. Let's just use, for example, how to paint a leopard. You go to an art lesson, you learn to paint a leopard. Now, how do you take that lesson and apply it to, say, a lion? Or how do you apply that to portraiture? Or how do you apply that to hair? The problem with learning a particular formula is that you end up knowing only that one thing. You walk away with a very, very small amount of information that you've gleaned from that, because you're missing one very important factor, in my opinion. And that is what to look for to draw anything. If you learn how to see, you're going to learn how to draw. So you'll find in my teaching that I'm not going to teach you how to draw one thing. I'm not going to have lessons like how to draw a leopard and not teach you what you're looking for in that leopard, as opposed to other lessons that you might watch how to draw a leopard and the artist will teach you how to draw the little fine hairs, etc., which is all very good and well, but then how do you apply that to drawing an elephant that doesn't have a lot of fine hairs, or portraiture, you know, that you've got smooth skin to deal with? It's far more important to learn how to draw what you see rather than learn how to draw a specific subject. When you're learning to draw a subject, your preconceived ideas are going to come into play as well. We touched a little bit on this yesterday, like I was saying, where we discussed the chairs and how our preconceived ideas of the chair being on a solid surface causes us to possibly draw the chair incorrectly. And that applies to everything. We all have some kind of preconceived idea about everything that we're drawing. This is particularly true in something like foreshortening, where we have a preconceived idea of a limb, let's say, and a person standing. And now we want to draw that person, say, lying down. And now instead of drawing that limb from front facing, we're drawing that limb from a foreshortened point of view. And suddenly we're stuck. We don't know how to draw it because we haven't been taught how to see correctly. So my intention is to actually encourage artists to learn to see properly. If you learn to see what you're drawing, and if you learn to interpret what you see, then you can draw just about anything. There'll be a lot of artists that will say, oh, hands are so difficult to draw, or eyes are so difficult to draw, or paint. I say draw, but I mean paint as well. And the reason for that is because your preconceived ideas of that particular subject is interfering with your creativity as an artist. So what you need to do is, instead of learning how to draw an eye, or instead of learning how to draw a hand, you need to learn how to draw what you see. And to do that, we've just gone through the fundamentals of art. And all those fundamentals that we've just been talking about are all the tools that you really need. So if you learn to use line and tone correctly and you practice them well, then that, coupled with learning to see correctly, and you can draw whatever it is that you're looking at, because whatever it is that you see, everything that you might be looking at, that you're trying to interpret to a drawing, is going to be affected by light. And light is tone. So you need to learn how to see the tones in your drawing, in your subject, so that you can interpret them onto a piece of paper when you're drawing. And the shapes that you're looking at, you need to be able to recognize, so that you can interpret the shapes to create the outline, if you want to call it that, of what you're drawing. What will happen if you go and sit under the tutelage of an artist who's going to teach you how to I'm using an example here, but how to paint a waterfall. That artist is going to teach you which brushes to use and which colors to use and which canvas to paint on. And at the end of the lesson, you might find that 20 different artists that are sitting under the same tutelage and sitting in the same lesson as you are will end up with very similar paintings because you've been taught by formula. So it's not coming from inside you. You don't want to learn to paint like everybody else. You know, I have a lot of artists that I teach here in my studio, and I will often get questions like, how do I paint hair? I want to do a portrait, but I have a problem with hair. Or I'd like to paint a seascape. I don't know how to paint water. Or I will have an artist painting something with quite a highly reflected surface and be struggling and say, how do you paint reflections? And you know, there's not one answer to any one of those questions. And my standard answers to my artists is, well, what do you see? Show me what it is that you are seeing in your source material. And I'll get them to actually point out the lights and the darks, point out the shapes. And my most common question, my most common answer to that question is, forget about the fact that you're drawing hair, or that you're drawing hands, or that you're painting water, whatever the subject is. Forget about what it is that you're painting. Look for your lights, your darks. Look for your colors, look for your lines, look for the transition zones between one texture and the next. You're looking for specific things in your source material that you are now going to duplicate onto your canvas or your paper, and you're going to put your own interpretation into that. Now, at some point, quite far down the line, I want to start talking about reinterpreting your source material in your own way. But for the moment, we're talking from early stages as we're learning to draw. And again, it's a very common misconception of artists that there is this magic formula that one has to learn, and when you know that thing, you'll know how to draw one thing. But then when you want to draw something else, you need to learn the other magic formula. And that's not the case at all. The magic formula is this. Learn to see tone, learn to see line, practice your drawing skills so that your brain and your hand are in coordination with one another, and learn to understand how different conditions like perspective affect what it is that you're looking at. One of the most common things that affects figurative artists is I see a lot of people drawing arms that are too skinny. And the reason that people draw skinny arms is because one has the preconceived idea that the arm, in comparison to other parts of the body, are much thinner, they're much smaller, much narrower. They tend to over-exaggerate the narrowness of the arms because their preconceived idea is affecting the way that they're interpreting the drawing onto a piece of paper, instead of actually looking at the arm. And like I was saying in my video yesterday, the best way to combat that is to forget about the fact that you're drawing an arm and relatively measure your drawing, measure how wide your arm is compared to, let's say, the torso, how many arms fit into a torso. You know, I can teach you certain techniques, which I'm going to do over time, how to hold your paintbrush, for example, how to paint darks before you paint your lights, how to paint fine lines by liquefying your paint, getting the right consistency of paint for the particular thing that you're painting. I understand all of that, and all of that is true. But none of that is going to mean anything if you don't paint what you see. I think if somebody came to me and said, what does it take to be an artist? I would have to say, it takes the ability to see. It's not the ability to draw or the ability to paint. It's the ability to see. The rest of it you can learn. And even seeing you can learn. Because all it takes is for somebody to point out to you where it is that you're going wrong. I often have it in art class. For example, I'll see one of my artists are struggling to interpret something, and when I go up to them and say, what is it that I can help you with? And they'll say, I'm really struggling to get these lips. Let's say, you know, they're doing a portrait. I'm really struggling to get these lips. And then I'll notice that the portrait that they're drawing, let's say the head is slightly tilted to the side, so the lips are a little bit foreshortened, but they're trying to draw the lips according to what you would see if you were looking face onto the person, which means that their preconceived idea is interfering with what they're actually seeing. So they're not drawing what they see, they're drawing what they think they see. And then all it takes is for me to point out a couple of lines. You know, notice how this lip goes around the corner, and so it creates a vertical line, or whatever the case may be, and the light bulbs go on, and all of a sudden they can draw it. It's not because they weren't able to draw, it's because they were incorrectly interpreting what they were seeing. If I could wrap up in one simple summary what it takes to be an artist, I would have to say it's learning to see shape, not object. Don't name your subject. Don't think of your subject in terms of what it is. Think of it in terms of what shape it produces. The next thing that you will look at is how light affects what you're looking at. Where are the highlights touching your subject, and what shadows is it casting? The next thing would be to practice your drawing skills so that your hand becomes obedient to your brain, so that your hand actually follows the intent. So my wrap up for this entire lesson is all those elements of art that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, those are the tools that you use to interpret what you're looking at. And that, coupled with practice and coupled with time, is what gives you your individual stamp as an artist for anything that you draw. Artists, I hope that this lesson has helped you. I hope that you will share and like the videos, and I hope that you will go onto the YouTube channel and subscribe and invite all your friends to join us. And I will see you tomorrow in day 41. Bye!
That's what you want to do.